All right, well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to tonight's Planning Policy Commission. It's great to see some guests. Looks like we have a full bench up here. It's been a while since we met last. We had some news here in the city. Had a bomb cyclone rip through here, so I hope everybody was safe. I hope there's been no damage to your guys' houses. I'm sure we have a lot of different stories to tell. But this evening, we're going to kick off, and we're going to call this meeting to order at 6:31 p.m. Today's meeting is a hybrid meeting. The Planning Policy Commission is in person, but staff or members of the public may be attending virtually or in person. Stephen, do we have a quorum this evening?
Chair Voice, yes, you have a quorum tonight.
Okay, excellent. We'll start with some housekeeping. I see that we have some guests this evening, but the first item of business is to take action to approve the minutes for the October 17th and the October 24th PPC meetings. Let's start with the 17th. Are there any corrections to the draft minutes that were provided to you? All right, hearing none. The meeting minutes of the 17th are approved. We'll move on to the October 24th meeting minute. Any corrections, anything of note? Okay. Those meeting minutes are also approved. At this point, we are going to hold our public comment. Seems rather obvious, but staff, we have people to sign up this evening for public comment?
Yes, Chair, we do.
Okay. Any online?
There are currently none online.
Okay, and we'll begin with this evening's guests in person. So we do ask that you speak clearly and pause frequently, state your name before speaking, and we do ask that you keep your time to 5 minutes or less. This is an important part of the public process. We take them seriously. They are factored into decisions that we make. And at this point, we'll be taking general public comments about the agenda this evening or anything else you'd like to discuss. So do we have an order? Like to go?
Chris Creighton, please.
Okay, thank you.
Better? Okay. Good evening. I'm Chris Craven, and I've lived in Issaquah's Old Town since 2012, and I've been an Arts Commissioner since May of 2023. I want to thank the Planning Policy Commission and staff for acknowledging the importance of Issaquah's creative district. I agree with the need to encourage future and existing development to enhance the goals of this geographically defined area. Facilities can enhance cultural activities, creative industries, and arts, and help to create a vibrant community. I first learned about the proposed draft regulations at this week's Art Commission meeting. I am in support of the Arts Commission response and encourage you to review and consider their recommendation. I believe if we focus on the appropriate process and collaboration instead of strict, defined prescriptive requirements, we will have a much better outcome in the long run. And I thank you for this opportunity.
Rachel Wright.
Hello, I'm Rachel Wright. I am the co-chair of the Issaquah Arts Commission, and I'm also a member of the Creative District Advisory Board. Creative districts are a mix of aesthetics and economic drivers intended to retain and recruit creative businesses. The creative vibe builds upon itself, turning into a destination for locals and visitors alike. Unique experiences in a special place. Our designation in 2020 came after we were already starting to lose creative businesses. Over the summer of 2019, Front Street lost a local grocery, a gallery, and a music store, and that was before the pandemic. Once the designation came through, there was a visibility problem. It took a long time for us to get our creative district signage up again because of delays with the pandemic. So things didn't look and they didn't feel different. One of the first projects to go up post-designation in about 2022 was the Brown Bear Car Wash on Gilman. And there was another visibility problem. This time, Developers and businesses knew about Old Town, but they didn't necessarily know about the Creative District. References to the Creative District weren't found in the code. In vibrant creative districts, businesses of all types have room to participate, adding to the special vibe of a destination. I appreciate your thoughtful consideration on how to set the conditions for a collaborative, creative placemaking process. Thank you.
Those are all the comments that I have. Connie?
I'm Connie Marsh, and you've, I think, got my typical flutter of emails to read. So I'm a little more holistic in art in Issaquah. Jacob Two Trees was permitted as a sign, and it didn't even end up having to go through a development process and the critical area studies in advance of its construction because of that. And you know, many people go, it's right in a buffer, and it's not the way it needs to be. So, Creative District, whole city, I think we need a pathway for art that is different than a sign. One of the problems with Brown Bear is they started saying, well, you got a bear, but the bear is a sign because it's a signature brown bear. And so then you get to what is art. And art can be huge. Art can have huge impacts. It can have a lot of people going to it. But you don't want it to be really hard to put up art or do art, because you also have active art, public art. So I agree that there's a deficit. I don't think it's just a creative district deficit. I think it's something that we need to put in the use table so that we have a pathway of what we want to do with art. I don't think it has to be complicated, but I think it does need to exist. But I also don't think as a policy board, this is your job really. I think I would toss it back with a suggestion that we create something entirely different than was presented to you to help solve the problem. I would ask yourselves, what is the problem we're trying to solve here? Because I think that's unclear. Thank you.
Are there any more comments? Chair, there are no more comments.
Anybody else like to speak? Okay. Well, we thank you, the public that participated. We appreciate those comments. And now we will move on to our regular business. We have one item under regular business tonight, and it is to review the proposed code amendments to establish the creative district and standard. Madeline Nelson, our planning intern, will be presenting this evening. Madeline, when you are ready, please go ahead.
I think everything is all set up then. Good afternoon, commissioners. It's a pleasure to be presenting tonight. My name is Madeline. I am a planning intern, and I'm here tonight to present on adding the creative district to the Issaquah Municipal Code. So the purpose of tonight's meeting is to review and provide some initial feedback on the draft amendment, and also to explore if there are any additions you want to add to the code. So to start us off, we can think about some guiding questions as we go over the materials. These just include questions like, is there feedback on the draft amendments, or is there feedback on staff's recommended approach, which we will get to later. So I want to take some time to go over some background to evaluate where we are right now. So the creative district in Issaquah has been established with signs throughout downtown and also its own webpage on the city website. But beyond this, it has not been empowered through the code. This amendment we are proposing allows the creative district to have a basis in code, which permits it to have standards and regulations as well. So we can talk over a bit about how we got to this point of desiring to have the creative district empowered through code. One example of this was during the Title 18 overhaul feedback, where public comments highlighted insufficient attention to the arts. And then as mentioned in public comment, during the installation of Jacob Two Trees, the sculpture just down the street from us, a lack of a clear permitting process for art meant that it was permitted through the sign permit process, which one could see might not be the most appropriate. And then also during the Brown Bear Car Wash projects, during permitting, the Arts Commission emphasized the creative district's significance and the need for art-related code provisions at a development commission meeting as well. And then during the comprehensive plan updates, the Arts Commission chair pointed out gaps in addressing arts during PBC's review of the arts and culture element. So as a result of these different events, staff identified art in the code as a priority for this year's code update list. So here are some considerations for when we are amending the creative district code. The area is already governed by a few different types of code, including the Old Town Design Standards and zoning. Then as for the topic of art, it is governed through a couple state requirements and the Art Commission Code of Conduct. The code amendment is being proposed to fall into the specified use standards. This is code that regulates specific zones or activities by imposing additional conditions beyond the general zoning code. The creative district being located in this chapter allows the zoning in downtown to remain intact while we just impose additional standards on top of that zoning. And then the specified use standards regulates, for context, it regulates other uses like residential, commercial, mixed use, affordable housing, and more. And then we can see with this map that the Old Town neighborhood overlaps quite significantly with the creative districts. And this neighborhood is primarily governed through the Old Town Design Standards, which are pretty detailed regulations focusing on the design of building frontages and form. Some categories that have regulations include windows, storefronts, roof lines, and color standards. So the creative district does not necessarily need to dive into that kind of regulation, as it's already being covered for the downtown area. As for existing regulations regarding art, there are really only two provisions. This includes a state requirement that public developments must dedicate a certain percentage of funds for the installation of art on the premises of whatever project is being developed. And then also for the city of Issaquah, the Arts Commission's Code of Conduct, which regulates the buying and selling of art along with some other actions as well. But besides for these two provisions, there is no other code in the IMC that regulates art. So with a bit of background covered, we can get into our proposed regulation. So here's a map of the creative district. And the green starting near the bottom is where we are right now at City Hall South for context. The district includes much of Front Street up to I-90 while excluding much of the single-family residential in the area. The code provided in the amendment is intended to apply to all new commercial, multifamily, and public facilities developments within the boundary. So we currently are just proposing just one provision for the creative district. This provision would require that each new development that fell into the applicability section in of the other slide must install at minimum one artwork on the premises. And then for the purposes of this section, artwork is being described as a production expressing creativity and technical skill with the intent to be appreciated for its aesthetic or emotional power, which we can definitely talk about more, as trying to define artwork is kind of a tricky process. but that's what it currently is. And then other requirements is that the artwork must be able to be viewed from the streets, and it may be located inside of whatever the facility is, if it is positioned in a window next to the street. But the artwork must also be constructed out of durable materials. We do have we also included some dimension standards. This is mainly to ensure that someone couldn't put out a very small or minuscule type of artwork and have that apply as well. For two-dimensional art, we're proposing that the artwork must cover 50% of the surface it is being applied to. And then for three-dimensional artworks, the artwork is being proposed to occupy at minimum a 12-foot cubic space, which this is just if you were to imagine a box placed over the artwork would touch each pane of the box. So it's not meant to be complicated or overly mathematical. And then here's some examples of how that might look. These are boxes which are about 12 cubic feet in size. And then here's a list of artwork mediums that we're outright permitting. This includes murals, sculptures, water features, mosaics, or engravings. If there are any mediums that should be encouraged, then that feedback would be very valuable as well. Although we did include a avenue for alternative installations to be permitted, which is to account for multimedia or other mediums of art that we might not be thinking of currently, and so that we can allow a greater variety of art right off the bat. And this would just kind of fit into the same regulations as other art, but it must be approved by the director, assuming that it meets the following conditions, such as it conforms to the definition of artwork, is located adjacent to the street, and must be large enough to be easily viewed from the adjacent street. As you might have heard, we had a meeting with Arts Commission on Monday evening, which was a very valuable meeting. And I did want to summarize some of the feedback that we got, even though there is a longer and more in-depth attachment in the packet. But some of this feedback could be summarized as the Commission was in favor of including the creative district in the code. However, they thought that we could find avenues for art installations to be incentivized rather than required. There are also ideas about how to imbue the planning process with art, such as through incorporating goals of the creative district into the permitting process, allowing art expertise in decision-making, and the creation of a public art permit. And then finally, there is recommendations to include art installations in all existing developments, rather than just the new developments as currently described in the amendment. And then this is just a general timeline of the code amendment. Right now we are in the initial review, but I would like to take a moment to describe our recommendation, which is that our primary objective is that we wish to continue discussions with the Arts Commission as part of the action plan process. Then when that concludes, we will come back to PBC with an updated district amendment. Although we would likely not be able to return to PBC until 2026 in this situation. And then that brings us back to our guiding questions, which we can consider as we start the discussion. Thank you, commissioners, for letting me speak with you tonight. If anyone has questions or feedback, that'd be very much appreciated.
All right, let's get to questions and feedback. Commissioner Krass.
Hello, this is Commissioner Krass. So if you think about, there's two buckets. You have public, which that's already taken care of. And what we're talking about is for private development. And I agree with the Arts Commission of making it encouraged versus required. And I'm not sure where that sits right now, but then the question is, what does encouraged mean? And what are the potential options and levers to get someone to do it, but without requiring them to do it? And I saw there's some ideas in the packet, but has there been more thought to, number one, are we focused now on just making it not a requirement, but encouraged? And what would the types of elements be to help them kind of get over the hurdle if they're encouraged to want to go ahead and do this? Because like through I'll leave it at that.
Okay, sure. So there's a couple of ways that we could incentivize art that we are aware of now. I'm sure that we could research this topic more, but some of them are like reducing permit fees or other development costs if they include art on the premises. Or you can also do art if, like, it's like conditional, where if they put art on the premises, then they can be more relaxed in another area of code. So those are two ways that we could kind of incentivize art with like being more relaxed in certain developmental areas if we let them do art instead of like meeting certain conditions.
A follow up on that. So devil's in the details on that. The question though is it staff's point of view now that it should be encouraged versus required, or where's the thought of overall staff? Maybe I'm sorry, looking at you, Stephen. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no,
Or
Stephen Badua, Long Range Planning Manager. Thank you for the question, Commissioner Krass. So it really depends on what the desired outcomes from the commission, from both Arts Commission as well as the Planning Policy Commission, on what we're trying to get. We have policy language that encourages art in all of our projects, public or private, but it doesn't incentivize it in terms of what Madeline was talking about in terms of trading off of relaxation of any type of regulations when it comes to development. That's not in place now. And then in terms of regulating, requiring it for any development, that's just stricter language, as you're all familiar with a lot of our code updates. Encouragement is not something that belongs in the code unless there's some type of incentive as provided by it. If it's just encouraging and wanting some type of portion to come in the development, that being art in this case, then we have to require it if that is the desired outcome. So from staff perspective, it's really just depending on the desired outcome from the commission. And that's why the suggestion is to continue the conversations with the Arts Commission.
Thank you, Commissioner Krass. Questions? Vice Chair Bader.
Yeah, I think I'm not going to articulate myself well because I have like a bunch of different questions floating around in my head, but I think the top one is that kind of overarching question of what is this trying to achieve? Because to use the Jacob Two Trees example, right, I don't know that this solves that. And so does there need to be more in that for kind of like standalone, art projects that are not part of a, redevelopment or new kind of build? That's one question. Like, what is this trying to accomplish?
Do you mean the art amendment? Like the art requirement? Okay.
Yeah, so like if they say Jacob Two Trees got nailed in this department, and we're like, okay, we need to now build it down here instead. Does this now give a pathway for that to be built in a way that we would all have wanted it to be built the first time? And I don't know if the answer to that is yes, based on what I'm reading in the kind of proposed code. And then the other kind of question that's in my head of like, what is this trying to achieve is, I also heard like visibility. So when I first heard comments, it was like, oh, we just need the creative district to be known, right? That if you're building in this area, you're in the creative district, and therefore there are these things, right, that you, I guess, must, right, do. And if that's the point, then that does this a bit more for me. And then there's also like another question about how this overlaps with like existing regulations. So like, where is the boundary between a sign and art if it's like painted on the side of a building, and is the artwork related to the purpose? Like, how do those two, like, how does the sign code and this potentially fit together, as well as like Old Town regulations and this? So those are kind of the questions floating around in my head that you don't answer, but things that.
Well, at least for the first part, for the first question that you asked about, like if Jacob Two Trees was damaged and had to be moved, that would fall more into like an art permit situation. I wouldn't necessarily assume that this code that we have in front of us would be able to really meet that. This is really to define like an aesthetic for the downtown, so that way when you're walking into the creative district. There's a few other famous creative districts in the States, like Edmonds Waterfront. I'm not sure if you guys have visited, but I get the sense that when I walk in there that I can tell that it's a creative district. So the requirement to have art would be for the main purpose of like establishing a zone for creative people to come and be like attracted to that zone, as well as provide more economic opportunities for artists in Issaquah, as this would drive demand up for sculptures and so on, and murals.
You had a third question in there. Can you repeat that?
Third was how this interacts with the other regulations, like the sign regulations and like Old Town standards.
So the reason why, I'll use the brown bear case as an example. The reason why the brown bear statute couldn't be used is because in our sign code, it defines signs as something where it's advertising the business. And so the sculpture that was being proposed was a brown bear, straight from what the name of the business is. And so that's kind of why there's a balancing act of what does our sign code say versus what can we actually call art. And so that's something that still needs to be rectified in the code in terms of how are we balancing what's art versus what's a sign. Sign code's very clear in what's a sign, but there's not enough guidance to say how do we guide a permit process for art.
That's helpful. So just to kind of summarize then, the purpose of this really is to help encourage, right, the artistic expression and the ability to have art exist in the creative district in a more robust way than it is now.
Yes.
Commissioner Krass?
So there's two, Stephen, you mentioned one thing. We talked about earlier, like required versus encouraged, and what does that mean, and those incentives. Then there's what is an art permit and what should it be? That's a different question. And that would be regardless of whether it is encouraged or required. So I don't know if there's a current art permit required if someone wants to do an installation on the side of their building now, and if so, is there new thoughts of how that wants to be changed if it already exists?
There is not an art permit for private developments in any way at all, I don't believe, but we do have a permit process somewhat for art in public developments, like Jacob Two Trees or the Diver and the Issaquah.
For
Cool.
public, I'm going to jump in because for public projects, we currently have no permit for art. Which is why for Jacob Two Trees, why a sign permit had to be used.
Oh, good. I was thinking more like the Dairy Gold wall. Beautiful big mural and all that. Is that art? If so, then if I was Dairy Gold and I had that big wall, would I need a permit to do that, or can I just do it right now?
On private property, you can just do it.
Okay.
But it also has to fall under, does it fall under the sign code in terms of, is it a sign for the business? So that's kind of why we go back to.
No cows in that one, but
Exactly.
yes, we'll see, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the same thing along those lines. You have Dairy Gold, you have Burger Master, you have the H Saloon, you got the Brown Bear. Again, where do these fall between signs and art? I think you can make
Is the goal to have a permit process for art installations on private land? Or is that part of this discussion and scope? Or is it really the discussion, should we require it? And if so, what are those requirements? But even if you require it, then you have to have some rules and permits for them to do it. So I'm just curious of where the guardrails of this discussion we want to have today.
In my research so far into art permits, it is generally just for like the structural aspect of art, for like the structural aspect of like Jacob. There was a permit for that with pretty extensive detailing over how he was, fastened to the ground to prevent injury. Certain cities do have a permit process, a pretty relaxed permit process for murals and so on, but that's to like protect the aesthetic visual of the city more so than like any sort of structural.
So if I'm building a 8-plex apartment building and I want to have a big sculpture in the front, can I just do it without right currently? Like I say, I'm just trying to understand what the now is and what we want to have in the future.
Under the building permit for your development, it would be looked at for any structural or safety issues for the structure in terms of placement. Is it conflicting with any other regulations? Is there any safety issues related to what the sculpture is? And does it fall under being a sign for whatever your business is too? So those are the things we would look at.
Commissioner Zakharoff.
Thank you. My question is, Edmonds Creative District is actually state certified. Is that a goal also for Issaquah
I believe
Creative
that we are
District?
state certified under Arch Washington program.
Okay, thank you.
Questions, comments? Just a couple questions. How did you guys originally come up with boundaries for the creative district that was put in place in 2020?
That was decided by Amy Dukes, which is the head of the arts department. There is some requirement for the size, so I know that was a factor. But beyond that, I'm not sure what other requirements were taken into consideration.
And then the other question is, where is there a comparable city that has this 12 cubic square feet? Where did you guys come up with that number as far as dimension?
This code amendment with the art requirement, there is not another city that has this kind of proposal. So all of the content is pretty original in that sense. It is based on some of language that you see in other cities, but this is the first city where we are proposing like a strictly art requirement. And we can definitely debate the size requirements. That's just a starting point that I'd really love to get feedback on that, honestly.
Commissioner Kennedy.
So talking about other cities, so we're not reinventing the wheel, or maybe we are inventing a new wheel. Are there other cities that already have code in place? I mean, it sounds like some do. I mean, who is it we can look to sort of start this process? You know, it sounds like we're sort of doing our own thing, but there must be somebody else. Are we that unique?
For the art in particular, or?
To have
creative
code
district.
in this realm. I mean,
Or in this realm of looking at, are we permitting art on private property, public property, or in between? This is new ground. A lot of cities provide some guidance on art going in for private development, but they don't require it, and they don't have specific dimensions on what it should look like, particularly because they're trying to let art be more creative and sticking to the nature of what art is. What we are trying to solve are a couple different issues within our code of how do we address the need for art. One of them is within the creative district, and the other is within private developments outside the creative district. And the other component is how do we address art in public right-of-way and public property. So those are some of the conversations we'd like to continue with the Arts Commission as they discuss the development of their arts action plan.
so it sounds like we're being a bit of a trailblazer.
Nothing wrong with that. Comments? Vice Chair Bader?
On the size thing, I guess I would want to throw that back to the Arts Commission, and I don't see that addressed in their letter. Because I can understand from kind of the enjoyment of public art why you would want to have big art, but it seems like somewhat limiting if you feel like this is not like, being forced to make big art in a certain space. I'm not sure. So I guess I would just want to hear from the Arts Commission.
One is the size requirements, is this for public or private? I want to make sure we keep these separate because I think they are a different conversation.
What's proposed in your packet is primarily for private.
Okay. And I think this could become a moot point if we have the point of view that we don't require it. Then although all the details aren't important, but then the discussion is then what type of encouragement and other levers you can have besides requirement to get people to want to do interesting art that makes it a more beautiful place. As you can tell by my questions, I'm leaning heavily of not requiring this and agreeing that, but then it just changes the conversation, not about size of box and things like that. It's like, okay, what does it mean to help them get their projects through faster? It doesn't have to be cheaper, but maybe faster or something else or other tools. Maybe it's an art consultant or whatever that helps them to want to do that. So I think that's the first order of discussion. Your voice is, if it changes where the discussion will be if we think it's one way or the other.
Sure. I mean, I'm of the mind that, like, again, I kind of like encourage more than encouraging through incentivization than actually requiring it. I think you're going to run into problems, especially if we're trying to go backwards. It's one thing to start with new development, things like that, but I also don't really like the idea of a permit myself. And the reason being is, we're not trying to make it harder for developers, we're trying to make it easier. But at the same time, I do like the idea of a director. I don't know who that would be, if someone in the city, because what you don't want is offensive art. You don't want poor water features of the city. I mean, again, but to your point, if this is all private, they'll be more spaced out. But that's kind of where I'm leaning as well. I like the idea. The downtown, old town has always been creative. And again, we're also talking about alternative art installations, whether it's the Blue Street Jazz Alley, some of the things they do throughout the summer. During the pandemic, we also closed Front Street. We had outdoor seating, so all of that stuff. Music, obviously, there's Battle of the Bands that happens at the library entrance. So it's hard for me to, how do you require something so vast? And then at the same time, again, I don't know if it should be a requirement, because I don't know how you can go back in time and then start telling businesses or multifamilies, what have you, okay, we need an art installation. You've been here for 20 years, but you guys are falling within these boundaries. So again, I'm kind of with Commissioner Krass. I like the idea of encouraging. I like the idea of having someone who can help direct. This is what Issaquah would like to see. If you want the incentive, here's where you need to comply. Right? We need to be 12 foot by 12. These are the 5 things you can list from. These are the 5 things you can pick from, different art installations, and you can work with the city, somebody from the city as a director. Again, I don't like the idea of a permit, and maybe that's how we address, okay, you've passed the test, now we offer you this, this, and this, without having to go the permit route, which I don't like. And again, I don't know if making it a mandatory thing is good either. Commissioner Issaquah.
Sorry, I may be on a little bit different topic. I just looked up the Edmonds. They are more focused on creating creative businesses. So while we, as I kind of see, we're discussing more how to beautify more our city. City of Edmonds is thinking more about creating more business opportunities for the small businesses that are creative businesses. And the plan itself was saying that we are trying to create more jobs, job opportunities. So I kind of don't see how beautifying the city, making murals and sculptures and everything will create more jobs, except for creating the mural itself or a sculpture or cleaning it. Let's say, like, where's the point there? It's kind of, we're looking at it from a little bit different perspective, I think.
Commissioner Issaquah, that's a great point. A lot of the work that the Arts Commission actually works on is helping to build up creative businesses throughout the city, and so that's part of the work. The gap we're trying to fill is more the aesthetic component of all of it. The intent isn't to be creating more businesses, but create more opportunities for those creative businesses in the city.
Yeah, and again, I think there's a place for the Art Commission to come up with, again, here is a list of what you can choose from. Here's what we would like to see. This is what, we would consider, okay, let's talk to whoever we put as an authority in it and say, okay, you've passed, you've chosen from one of these 5, a director checks it off, so you get the reward, I guess. That's kind of, and that's my thinking itself. But by all means, Commissioner Patterson.
Thank you, Commissioner Patterson. I have a couple of thoughts. One is, overall, I think my recommendation is to have the city take a look at the Arts Commission's recommendation more thoroughly and apply it to the next draft of this amendment. And I say that because I think it's a good mix of passion, knowledge, and being reasonable. A lot of their suggestions, I think, show that obviously they care a lot about what they've suggested here, and I think it also makes a lot of sense for what we're trying to accomplish with our goals. For instance, like I know they said to expand some of the options for art and development, calling out specifically like performance venues, maker spaces, markets and such. I think that's really forward thinking. You know, it goes beyond just murals, right? To Commissioner Zakharow's point, you're looking at opportunities for artists to share their craft, make money, you know, potentially some businesses to go in within the arts fields. So I think overall, that's just one example of kind of a great suggestion within there. To my commissioner's points, I do think that there's some muddling of public versus private a little bit that maybe could become a little more clear for us. My kind of interpretation of it is that from a private perspective, we're kind of trying to put design standards out there that relate to the creative district and how that kind of overlay would apply. But I think when looking at the Arts Commission's recommendations, particularly for permitting, it's actually regarding public art and public art permits. And so I think there's a delineation there, maybe where, Stephen, you had called out that for private, it would be part of the overall permitting that they do for the development. And then for public, it would be something public art would be something separate permit, like that would be the permitted piece. And that also gives the pathway to break it away from signage, right? Or like a sign permit to create that delineation. So a lot of thoughts bouncing around, kind of like Commissioner Bader. But that's kind of where I'm at right now in terms of all the noise.
Well said, Commissioner Patterson. Any other feedback or comments from Madeline or the Arts Commission? Did you get what you need, Madeline?
I believe so, yes.
Okay.
Thank you, guys.
There's a lot there.
I appreciate it. We will probably...
Yeah. Oh, please, Minnie.
Good evening, Commissioners. So if I may summarize what we heard, and if there's consensus. So there's consensus, I think, from most of you to not have it as a requirement, pursue the path of encouragement with the incentives piece. Is that sort of?
Okay.
Okay. And then more clear delineation between public versus private art, sign versus art, clearly define those two. And in terms of the prescriptive pieces, not so much support, but giving more flexibility on each situation. But, that's the fine line of figuring out what's too prescriptive, what's too wishy-washy, and room for development. But seems like not too prescriptive is the general support for that.
Commissioner Grass?
Yes. One other thing I would add on to that is we're talking about incentives pretty generically, and I think another kind of run through of here are the 5 that we think may make a difference and that are feasible. It'd be nice to hear it come back from your guys' perspective, from experience, like what's doable, what other cities may have done that they found some success. I think that's the devil's in the details on some of those things.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, we would take a much deeper dive into our design standards, because in those we do have, if you have blank walls, you can pick 5 of these options. Art may not be one of them. We may say a trellis and landscaping or something, but, how does it interplay with the actual building design pieces, and giving more flexibility on design standards comes to mind. The permitting, expedited permitting was there, but we also have State Bill 5290 staring at us with very stringent timelines, so I'm not sure, from a practical standpoint, how much we can push that as an incentive until we figure out meeting our timelines for 5260 is sort of our priority there. But did we miss anything out of, this was a high-level summary of the approach, and of course we would go back and have those conversations with Arts Commission through the work they're going to do with the Art Action Plan, and then come back with a revised proposal.
I think Minnie summed it up very well.
Okay.
Thank you, Minnie. He was able to take all that, turn it into that. Thank you, Minnie, and thank you, Madeline.
Thank you.
Okay. We are going to move along to reports. I believe, right, Stephen? Your calendar updates in the report, correct?
Yeah. Let's go with that.
Sure.
Thank you, Chair Voice. So for council update tonight, on December 2nd, City Council adopted the city budget. That'll be outlining essentially a lot of our work plan for 2025 and 2026. They also adopted the comprehensive plan, and they put their appreciations to Planning Policy Commission's commitment to working through a lot of those discussions on policies and updating and reviewing all of the elements that went into the comprehensive plan. And so I just want to make sure you know that they very much appreciated all the meetings that you had gone through to help with the periodic update. At that meeting, they also adopted the strategic plan. And so if you're interested to see kind of that 5-year plan outlook of what the city's going to be prioritizing or how the city's going to be prioritizing, that plan will provide that outlook for you. That's it for council update.
Okay. All right, so the next item on the agenda is other business and announcements. Stephen, are there any other business or announcements?
I'll just start with, in your packet was included the work plan, a very rough outline work plan for 2025. Feel free to take a look at it and let me know if you have any questions. The vast majority of what we are looking at least for the first half of the year, is to look at code update. Following up with annual review of the municipal code or of Title 18 to see what housekeeping items we can take care of in 2025 and continue conversation on some of the policy discussions on code updates as well.
Okay. Well, thank you, Stephen. So to close out our business and amendments tonight, I would like to do something a little different this evening. This is Vice Chair Bader's last meeting with me. So I don't like making motions very often, but this is probably going to be my most favorite motion that I get to make. So for the rest of the meeting, I would like to make Vice Chair Bader the chair of the Planning Policy Commission of the City of Issaquah. I'm looking for a second. Okay, we'll open it up for discussion. I'll begin. I do want to thank you, Sarah. You've been a fantastic partner. A lot of you guys don't see some of the hard work, the emails, the meetings with Stephen behind the scenes. Sarah's been a tremendous partner for the last 2 years, and I'm very bummed out that I won't have such a fantastic partner. But it's not just that, too. It's Sarah at times has challenged my perspective on things, and always done it in such an agreeable way that it's been easy for me to change my perspective. And I think I'm a better commissioner for it. So, and I want to. Floor.
Yeah, I think I'll open up the floor.
We got to vote on it first. So, Commissioner Krass.
Well, we wish you the best. I've only known you for, I guess, 1.5 years. Hopefully, you're moving on to something fun and exciting. You can tell us after the microphones go off. But wishing you the very best.
Commissioner Kennedy.
I'll ditto the thank you and to say part of my appreciation is the fact that so many times you say what I'm thinking, so I can just sit here quietly and nod along because you have you are already saying my thoughts, so I can just be like, ditto, love it.
Well, we've just met several months ago, and it's been a pleasure working with you. And just it was the same thing. You're always saying exactly the same thing that I'm thinking. So yeah, that was awesome. Good luck.
I wish I had more time to prepare a longer speech, but that usually gets me in trouble anyway. So, yeah, you're going to be missed so much. I think if I had one word to kind of summarize your, what you bring to our commission, it's probably empathy. I think that you always are looking at the human side of a lot of the issues that we come across, and that's a really important aspect of it. And I know it's one that you'll continue to spread throughout your life. So.
All right. Well, thank you, commissioners. So the motion on the floor is again to make Vice Chair Bader Chair Bader for the rest of this evening to gavel us out. All in favor, say aye. Aye. The vote is unanimous. So Chair Bader.
Well, that was very kind. I don't have like words prepared, but I'll say something because I always have to say something. So I think most of you know that I joined this commission 2021 or 2022? 21, yeah. Right after COVID, right after kind of the city's kind of initial response to doing something about equity. And I spent most of my career up until that point. Previous to that, I was an urban planner in a different country. And so this was a really kind of cool melding of my worlds. Realizing that I was doing a lot of telling others how to do this sort of work in their communities, but wasn't doing it myself in my own community. Realized that this might be an opportunity to do that. And I'd like to think I've done that a little bit over the past couple of years. So it's been really a privilege to serve the city in this way. I'm leaving Issaquah, which is sad. So I'm moving all the way across the country. We're Boston bound. So some other little planning commission will hopefully have an application from Sarah Bader in the near future because I really enjoy this. And it's meaningful work, and I think Issaquah is going to be better off because we're doing. Thank you all for the kind words. Thank you, staff, for having me and dealing with my questions and my helpfuls that I do all the time. With that being said, there being no further business.
Just a few words from staff. I believe I speak on behalf of all the staff that we really, truly appreciated all the questions and the comments that you have provided for a lot of the policy discussion on the commission. And I ditto everything Jason said in terms of all the background conversations of having preparing and helping with getting the meetings put together has always been very appreciated by staff. And so I want to thank you.
Anything else? Going once, going twice. This time.
I want to also echo Stephen's thanks to all the hard work all of you do. You know, you have busy lives. You take time out of your precious time, read all our packets, and we've kept you busy since 2021 with all the Title 18 update, with the periodic comprehensive plan update. I'm sure the readings were strenuous and took time. But you've always been very thoughtful, like your fellow commissioners have said. They've appreciated your demeanor of how you bring the issue, how you take a very issue and lay it out in a very succinct, clear kind of a way. What comes to mind is, with the whole comp plan discussion that we were doing, at the end, it's the environmental justice piece was the missing piece. So you captured all of that and brought one, topic that we missed. So you will have your fingerprints on Issaquah's future for a very long period of time, all of you, and good luck to you as you take your family. It was a pleasure to meet your twins at the tour. I'll always enjoy, you have a job, you raised 2 kids, and you come here and make a difference for Issaquah, so thank you.
I'll miss you all. Okay, no one else gets to say anything else because I'm third time. There being no further business before the commission, I adjourn the meeting at 7:20 p.m.